So in terms of that, I mean, I always think Conquest, that any sort of cash flow tool, it should be an integral part now of the overall advice process. I think it's no longer just isolated pension advice or investment advice. It's the whole future that needs to be understood by clients. So, for instance, I've had clients come to me and just say, I've got a couple of pensions that I just need you to review, which is all well and good, but actually it's educating that client about what they've got now and what it might actually achieve in the future, based on what they've got, plus future contributions and inflation, various different assumptions. And that's where Conquest really comes into its own, and provides that ability to give that whole advice and give the client an understanding of the future in black and white as well. So what sets it apart, I find, is I've used quite a few different cash flow tools before. Some are super detailed and at times perhaps overcomplicated. It's the two-pronged process. It's what you're putting in, and I think Conquest gets it all spot on there, in that it's got all of the relevant assumptions. It's got the ability to adjust as and when it's needed. So you can actually put in real inflation assumptions, especially bearing in mind where in the UK we've been recently, and globally as well. You can take into account interest rates, you can take into account the growth assumptions on investment portfolios, and you can make all of those adjustments. And crucially, it's about, when you're presenting to that client, making sure that it is easily understandable, so you are not overcomplicating it all and they end up just completely switching off. It's just as important that they understand it and own that as well. And I think that then encourages them to be even more interested in their future. Ultimately, it's their money and their future. So yeah, I like Conquest for that reason. I don't want to use the word basic, but it's simple and easy to use. It's methodical, from both the advisor and the client's experience. Clients that I've known for over 10 odd years, you start to get to know them, and they're looking to build their pot of assets, all with the future in mind. And as you perhaps sort of approach retirement, for instance, I had a client this year, but over the years we've been working to retirement, saying, right, okay, what do you need? When do you want to retire? She finally said, right, that's it. I'm going to retire next year. So this was about 12 months ago. And she was so nervous. But what was so great was, with the ability to present to her the Conquest cash flow plan, she was actually able to see, okay, this is doable. And what I quite liked, even though it's slightly pessimistic, is being able to factor in, okay, what happens if the market crashes? What happens if inflation stays super high for longer? What if all of these potential sort of negative scenarios do actually take place? Can you still retire? And I was able to put those to her and present those, and that gave her real peace of mind. And literally April, she retired and went off on holiday for a few weeks, and she's super happy and very comfortable. But it's all doable. But it all comes from the trust is there with me as her advisor, but actually seeing it in black and white, and having all of that, the data going into it, gives her that additional, quite crucial reassurance as well. So yeah, it's really nice to be able to do that and give clients peace of mind in that respect. Some of the specific features are just the ability to be realistic in terms of what you're actually inputting. So it's not just, okay, everything's assumed at a certain growth rate. Everything is bespoke. So it's about each individual, and every client is so different. They've all got their own objectives and their own aims for the future, and the ability to factor in some of those, whether it's one of their children's weddings or the university fees, or what happens if, here looking at the inheritance tax plans, so the estate aspect as well. So having all of those features are really helpful, and it makes the advice process so much more relevant, and using Conquest more relevant when I'm giving that advice and presenting the cash flow to them as well. So yeah, that's that in a nutshell. So I think the conversations with clients have evolved with their engagement, I would say, so much more. When clients can see what things look like, and it really opens up the conversation with them, so they become a lot more interested. I think if you think about retirement planning for cash flow, I think back in the day, and probably quite a few people now, they're very focused on just putting money into the pension, put it in, have no real concept of what it's going to do or what it might do in the future when they retire. And they don't actually really engage in that conversation about, when would I like to retire? What might I like to actually retire on? What are my actual goals at that point? So it certainly opens up that conversation where they do suddenly think, well, hang on a minute, have I got enough if I want to do that, if I want to travel, if I do want to help the children out with property purchase, and things like that. So it engages them so much more. And then with some clients, they said, well, hang on a minute, I might be a bit short, or do I need to change my risk strategy? So it really makes people say, okay, maybe I should be a bit more efficient with my saving. And I think with that, it's the ownership, it's having the visualization from their perspective of what their future might actually give them. And I think it's a real positive thing. Like I've said before, it's their money and it's their future. So sort of helping them along on that journey, and being able to bring that to life is brilliant. And it certainly, it makes people a lot more interested in pensions, whereas typically I think some people find it very, very boring. Just to give it a go. It makes sense just to go through, speak to Conquest as well, get the training, get the guidance, but use it and see how they find it, because it definitely makes a difference. I think it ought to be part of any advice process when you're planning with clients for their future. It makes it, it's a really important tool for them.